Chapter 7 Political Parties, Participation, and Elections. President Barack Obama was reelected to a second term as President of the United States in the 2012 election against Republican challenger Mitt Romney. In defeating Romney, Obama won nearly every battleground state, including Colorado, Iowa, Ohio, New Hampshire, Virginia, Wisconsin, and the pivotal state of Florida, the fourth largest state in population. Florida is important not only because of its large number of electoral college votes, but because the number of Republicans and Democrats in the state are roughly equal, making it fiercely competitive every 4 years. What also made Florida unusual in 2012 was the large number of votes cast early prior to the election day. Early voting made a difference in 2012, even though new state rule had limited early voting. Nationwide, 25% of all votes were early votes, cast either in person or absentee by email ballots. In Florida, 53% of votes cast, 4.5 million votes of Florida, 8.4 million total votes were early votes, one of the highest rate in the nation. Early voting is a form of convenience voting. It allows citizens to vote in alternative ways on their own schedule rather than recurring that all votes be cast only in person on election day. As of 2014, 33 states allowed early voting in which any qualified voter may cast a ballot in person during a designated period prior to election day. Early voting mattered in Florida. Early voting mattered in Florida and in the 2012 presidential race, in part because Obama's campaign took advantage of early voting laws, employing a sophisticated voter registration database to get out the vote and call-in messaging and email supporters until it was confirmed that a ballot had been cast. But in 2012, the Republican-controlled Florida state legislature significantly reduced the number of days allowed for early voting from 14 days prior to the election to 8. The change eliminated weekend polling hours when many African Americans voted after church, with transportation provided by their congregation to and from the polls, which voters were negatively affected by this election rule change. Research by political scientists Michael Heron and Daniel Smith showed that racial minorities, particularly African Americans, were as well as individuals registered as Democratic, and those registered without party affiliation had reduced turnout in 2012 compared to 2008. Obama still won Florida, even with reduced turnout of African Americans and Democrats, but the change to early voting rules impacted the race. Elections are determined not just by how people vote, but by who votes. Political parties and elections are all about who control the government. Participation is about who gets involved and why. Social forces work through the parties to gain control over government personnel, meaning those who run the government and policies. Parties are also a mean by which those in government try to influence important groups in society. Political parties, participation in elections are mechanisms that help citizens change their government, but that may also help leaders consolidate or extend power. Parties and elections have been vital to American politics and government. Explain the role that parties play in American election and government. Political parties. like interest groups, are organized groups that attempt to influence the government by electing their members to government offices. Ordinarily, they can be distinguished from interest groups on the basis of their orientation. Orientation. A party seeks to control the entire government by electing its members to office and thereby controlling the government. Interest groups, by comparison, don't control the operation of government and its personnel, but rather try to influence government policies. Political parties arose from the electoral process. Political parties, as they are known today, developed along with the expansion of suffrage and can be understood only in the context of elections. Political parties and elections are to intertwine that American parties actually take their structure from the electoral process. The shape of party organization in the United States have followed a simple rule. For every district where an election is held, there should be some kind of party unit. Between 1900 and 1952, Republicans failed to maintain party units in most counties of the southern states where the Democratic Party had a near monopoly. Democrats were similarly unsuccessful in many areas of New England where the Republican Party dominated politics. But for most of the history of the United States, two major parties have had enough of an organized presence to oppose each other in elections in most of the nation's towns, cities, and counties. This makes the American party system one of the oldest political institutions in the history of democracy. Political parties play a traditionally important role in elections. They recruit candidates to run for office, get their loyal party members out to vote, and work in a variety of ways to promote the causes and issues of the party. In early times, the parties had nearly total control over the electoral process. In recent decades, however, they had lost their monopoly to candidates who decided not to work within the party to political action committee that raise and distribute millions of dollars for candidates and to direct appeals through the media. Parties recruit candidates. One of the most important party activities is the recruitment of candidates for thousands of local, state, and national offices. Where do they, where they do not have where they do not have incumbent 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 running for re-election, party leaders attempt to identify strong candidates and to interest them in entering the campaign. An ideal candidate will have an unblemished record. An ideal candidate will have an unblemished record and the capacity to raise enough money to mount a serious campaign. Party leaders are usually not willing to provide financial backing to candidates who are unable to raise substantial funds on their own. For a U.S. House seat, this can mean several hundred thousand dollars. For a Senate seat, a serious candidate must be able to raise several $1 million. Often, party leaders have difficulty finding attractive candidates and persuading them to run. Candidates recruitment had become particularly difficult in an area in which incumbents, candidates running for re-election to positions that they already hold, are hard to beat when lengthy political campaigns often involve mudslinging, and when candidates must assume that their personal lives will be intensely scrutinized in the press. Over 20% of House races are uncontested, meaning there is only one candidate from one party on the ballot because challenging incumbents in the House and winning is so difficult. Incumbents in the House, on average, have more than double the money for their political campaigns than challengers, while Senate incumbents have on average 50% more. Parties organize nomination. Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution delegates to the states the power to set the time, places, and manner of holding elections, even for U.S. senators and representatives. The Constitution has been amended from time to time to expand the right to participate in elections. Congress has also occasionally passed laws regulating elections, congressional districting, and campaign practices. But the Constitution and the laws are almost completely silent on nominations, setting only citizens and age requirements for candidates. The president must be at least 35 years of age, a natural born citizen, and a resident of the United States for 14 years. A senator must be at least 30, a U.S. citizen for at least 9 years, and a resident of the state he or she represents. The member of the House must be at least 25, a U.S. citizen for 7 years, and a resident of the state he or she represents. Nomination is the process by which political parties select their candidates for elections to public office. The nominating process can precede the election by many months, as it does when the many candidates for the presidency are eliminated from consideration through a grueling series of state primaries until there is only one survivor in each party, the party's nominee. The general election period begins immediately after the nomination. The general election period begins immediately after the nominations. Historically, this has been a time of glory for the political parties whose popular base of support is fully displayed. All the paraphernalia of party committees, signs, bumper stickers, buttons is on display, and all the committee members are activated into local party workforces. The first step involves voter registration. There was a time when party workers were responsible for virtually all of this kind of electoral activities, but they have been supplemented by groups such as the League of Women Voters, unions, and chambers of commerce, although the parties frequently mail notice and call voters to ensure that they are registered. Registered voters then have to decide on election day whether to go to the polling place, stand in line, and actually vote for various candidates and